Hey everyone, Jared Fisher, co-founder of Logistic, and today I'm here with Gary McKenzie, our Vice President of Operations. And Gary, let's talk about accounting. One of the questions we get a lot of is how to record freight costs in accounting. And so my question for you and for all of our viewers is what makes freight accounting different from accounting in other fields?
Yeah, it's kind of a loaded question. It's not really that different. There's just certain concerns that you have to have when you're accounting for freight costs. And it typically revolves around, there are two types of freight costs. And one of them gets added to the cost of your inventory, basically part of your asset value, and another is just a freight expense. So you need to keep track of how and why you're paying for the freight costs. Like for example, if you're buying inventory, and whoever you're buying it from charges you for the freight, that freight cost you would bring in, you would put it into a freight account that is incorporated into your cost of goods. So that's part of your inventory cost. If, however, somebody buys something from you and you just ship it out to them and you have to pay the freight to get it to them, that gets recorded like any other expense. It's just a freight expense. So those are the two main differences. So setting your accounting system up so that you can see and record the differences between the two is very important so that your financial statements are accurate.
All right, so that makes sense. So how do you set that up in your accounting system?
Well, in every accounting system, you have a chart of accounts. So at the end of the day, you need to make sure, just like anything else, you're properly recording what has happened in your business. So identifying that freight expense relative to what you're spending it for is very important. So if you don't have like a freight expense account, you should set one up in your chart of accounts. So anything that you pay out relative to shipping goods to your customers, that's where that would go. And if it's you're buying inventory or you're buying component parts for your business where you're making your assets, all of the freight associated with that would go into your freight in account or your cost of goods sold account. So two freight expenses in your chart of accounts to keep it separate.
Got it. So in relation to what you just said, what are the top mistakes that you see accounting departments make?
Well, they make a lot of mistakes, and it's really not so much the mistakes than the ramifications of the mistakes. How you book cost of goods sold is an IRS rule. So it's not something that you can, pretend to do or decide to do. It's something you have to do. So not setting it up initially to make sure that you are recording those expenses in the right buckets can have tax implications to any company.
Got it. All right, so why do so many general accounting departments struggle with how and when to record freight costs?
That's a very good question. And often accounting gets blamed for not doing things correctly. But in a case like this, having an accounting department, sifting through all of the freight expenses and having them decide which one is a freight in and which one is a freight out is probably just not good operational practice. So you actually need, very far downstream, you need to make sure that you have the ability to properly code those invoices as they come through so that when accounting gets it, they're just simply recording it. They may not know whether it's a part of an inventory buy or if it's part of something that was shipped out to a customer, but the folks on the dock would know that. So you need to push it downstream to that level of your operation to make sure that by the time it gets to accounting, there's no doubt where it should go.
All right, so what is laid down costs and how does it factor into an asset's value?
Well, the basic definition of a laid down cost are all of the costs that went into a particular product. So in the examples that I just gave a little bit earlier, the freight that you paid to have inventory or parts of inventory shipped to you, so freight in, that would be part of the laid down cost. And every other cost associated with that inventory would be part of the laid down cost. And this is how you're calculating your cost of goods sold.
So Gary, what is the importance of accurate record keeping in relation to optimizing shipping costs or freight costs?
That's actually a very good question. Most of the time when you're going to optimize your freight, the first place you're going to look is how much did I spend? And the place you find that is in your accounting records. So as I mentioned before, having the two separate freight accounts, a freight in and a freight out, some of those are controllable and some of those are not controllable. So if you aren't accurately keeping records of your freight expenses, whether they're part of your inventory or whether it's your freight out, you're not really going to have a good picture of where you can actually exert pressure to optimize your expenses. So it begins with, what are my reports telling me that I spent, last year, last month, last week, whatever it is. If those records are inaccurate, then you'll also make inaccurate business decisions.
Sure.
So very critical to both understand from an operational point of view, how are we making sure that all of these are classified correctly? From an accounting point of view, your accounting system itself, how to make sure that that is set up so that it is keeping those two separate. And then in the analysis of that information, what does it all mean? And are they controllable or uncontrollable expenses? And your financial statements are going to tell you that. It all begins with accurate financial statements.
Well, thanks, Gary, for the insight, and thank you, everyone, for watching. For more information on how you can join the thousands of nationwide shippers currently using Logistic to send cost packing, please visit our website at www.logistic.com.